everyone, and welcome to the Jeff Bullis Show. Today I have with me Charlie McCarrick. Now, Charlie has an accent that I had trouble struggling with, which I thought he was almost Irish, but he's actually American. And we had a quick chat about that. I've got an Australian accent, which is because I'm from Sydney, Australia. Charles is an entrepreneur, inventor, and lead visionary of MicroAnt. In 2022, MicroAnt won the SatCom Innovation Group Award for the most innovative product of the year for the successful development of the ultra-wideband 3.5 gigahertz car antenna system. And we're going to find out what that really means. The system enables connectivity over extended frequency bands in car for roaming across multiple satellite operators in all orbits. So Charlie's MicroAnt, obviously in the communications business. He has a PhD in Advanced Electromagnetics from the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. He is the author behind the book Lessons My Brothers Taught Me, about how budding entrepreneurs can harness life lessons and their personal qualities to yield success. A little bit more about Charlie. He grew up with 5 siblings, all of whom taught him important life lessons that he later applied to his career. His evolution from quitting his day job to founding and succeeding at building an extremely valuable high-tech business has been quite a journey. And what I love about Charlie is that he's not afraid to reflect on mistakes he's made along the way, because without learning from errors, he wouldn't be where he is today. Charlie has more than 10 patents to his name, and he pioneers and supplies unique equipment to the communications industry. So, Charlie, that's quite a resume. Thank you very much for coming on the show. It's an absolute pleasure.
Oh, are you kidding? Thank you, Jeff. It's I've been watching a number of your podcasts. You're a bit of a celebrity to me. And so to see you here live talking to me, it's a real thrill.
It's an absolute pleasure. I just love doing this podcast because I get to learn so much. And what we try and do is get behind the success of the qualities, success, the stories behind successful entrepreneurs, and especially in the tech and more digital industries. But Charlie, so your book is Lessons My Brothers Taught Me. Now, there's an interesting thing about that. You've got a sister as well. You left her out.
No. Well, she's in the book, and I actually dedicated the book to her. She was the oldest, and somehow managed to stay clear of all of the
Right.
hijinks.
Okay.
And so, but she was certainly present.
Okay, right, okay. I saw her name mentioned, so it's not as if you left her out, but I was just, I went, oh, my sister. Well, I had a sister too, and she was born 15 years after I was born, which that was interesting because we were 3 brothers, and then suddenly a sister shows up 15 years later, and it's like your idea of family changed almost. It was really fascinating, but enough about me. Look, the other thing I want to know is, what inspired you to write the book? Obviously, you had I read a bit of the book, and it's got some very colourful descriptions about the battles between the brothers in often sporting events. So is that what inspired you to write the book using that title?
Well, when I began it, I didn't plan on writing a book. It was during COVID, and all non-essential employees had to work from home, meaning those that did not lay their hands on the product. I was not an essential employee in terms of moving the product through the company, so I was one of the people working at home. And I found a lot of time in my hands where I was sewing and doing different things, building fishing rods, and I was just musing about all the things that the company had gone through, how relatively successful we were when looking at all the missteps that we had made. And I was wondering, how did we get past those steps? I mean, some of these things seemed that they were going to just drop us dead in our tracks, but we always managed to get through them. And I said, I'm going to try to write down the evolution of the company so I can understand it for myself.
Yes.
What happened, how we dealt with it. And as I was writing it, it was slowly becoming a manuscript. And I said, this could actually be a book that others might find useful. So as I was reading it and going through the manuscript, and as it evolved into a book, I noticed there was certain themes forming, and many of the situations that I had gotten into and gotten out of they were akin to those that I'd gotten into with my brothers while I was growing up. And I realized that many of the character traits that I possess and many of the experiences that I had came from those times. And I decided to give them credit. And so I called the book "Lessons My Brothers Taught Me," and in the book I talk about these various lessons. They weren't really meant to be teaching me anything. I think these were done for their own amusement. But these events that took place, I had a moral or a lesson after each one of them, and I attribute those to how I got through various issues as I was developing the company. So essentially, the book is about how I use the experiences that I had gone through growing up with my older brothers to navigate the business through difficult times.
Right. I love that in terms of there's a very good storytelling technique, which is tell a story and then make a point. And you're telling a story and making a lesson, which is the same deal, which is fantastic. So, because people say, what's the point of the story? And you obviously are producing a lot of lessons from all those stories, which is a great way to teach. So that's fantastic. And the other thing I love too is that you sat down and wrote about your life. And in other words, the thing I love about writing for me is that I write to learn and also to understand. And I think that's because you've got to take all this stuff in your head that's washing around. And we have so many conversations ahead. And I think the idea of putting it down on paper or virtual paper is to make sense of it. And sounds like you've taken your life and tried to make sense of it. And what did we learn along the way, which is fantastic. So, and this is what I love about books. And that's why I think you writing a book is just awesome, because when I read a book, and I'm sure I haven't read all of your book, but I'm going to. In fact, when I finish this call, I'd have my normal practice to spend a fair bit of time reading in the morning, is I'm going to sit down and start reading it. And I make notes. So just you have the distillation of sometimes 40, 50 plus years of life lessons that are distilled by the author, full of expertise and experience into just a few pages, which I find a great way to learn.
Well, I've read a number of business books, and some are extremely popular, and I think they're probably desktop books, guidebooks for many people in business. But the thing about those books, and they're good books to read, the part I like best is when they were calling upon actual experiences they had. But many of these books, all they're doing is they're simulating data and trying to come to prove some sort of causation and present that information. Yeah. And it's a lot less interesting to me. And at the end of it all, you say, this is really good stuff, but it's actually speculation. The author really didn't do any of the stuff, but rather gathered information, get a lot of information that others had done. And I'm not saying that these books aren't immensely popular or that they don't provide some very valuable information. I don't find them particularly entertaining. It's really not a fun read. So I wanted mine to be a little bit a combination of a story, a memoir. I wanted it to be fun and funny, and I wanted to provide information all at the same time. And whenever I see somebody get up and give a speech, they always say, start with something interesting, start with something personal, tell a little story, because people want to know how it's going to turn out. And so that's what I did. Rather than just say, here's a lot of information, here's some graphs, here's what others did, here's a bunch of stories. And by the way, they're tied together by these little, these various things that took place as my business evolved. So I was more interested in keeping it interesting and alive, and as well as personal, and not go overboard or burden the reader with too much on concept, structure, and all that, business parlance.
Yeah. I love the fact that you mentioned that you would rather hear a story by someone who's done it rather than just collecting data and then trying to create a structure, which we all want templates for life. Mostly I found is that tell me how to do it, write down sequentially.
That's right.
And we all know deep down that that's not the truth.
No.
So, all right. So you grew up with your brothers, and I heard that you constructed basically like an Olympic stadium of different activities that involve running, jumping, throwing, putting. Tell us a little bit about that before we get to why you started Microant and why you got a PhD. So, yeah.
Well, you got to realize we lived in the middle of nowhere. The middle of nowhere means there were no neighbors whom you could walk to or visit. And the only entertainment that we could have is that for which we could make for ourselves. So we would take old lumber, trees, whatever, and build roller coasters out of it. And I described the various amusements in this park that my brothers had created. And of course, there was no safety officer or parental guidance, supervision to make sure nobody was getting hurt. So, oh my gosh, we younger brothers would be put into these roller coasters or into these swings or these various rides that my older brothers would create and somehow survive them. You see kids wearing knee pads and bicycles and, and helmets when they're riding bicycles. Well, are you kidding? You were getting the crap beat out of you if you attempted to put, any kind of safety gear in yourself. I mean, you just went through it, and then they would give these things really creative names, and they were great at marketing. My brothers, get on the roller coaster, or get on the simulated flight machine, and which was a wheelbarrow, and they push you off the barn roof, and at the end you met gravity, in a very manner. That's one thing that all of the rides had in common. So yeah, they found ways to amuse us, and we found ways to amuse ourselves.
Yeah, that makes me reflect on my stories with my brothers. We used to make jumps for bikes. We used to make bikes with long forks. We used to jump creeks. We smashed bikes. We rebuilt bikes. We disappeared into the fields behind our place because it was the edge of suburbia, but there were a lot of fields to experiment in, and we had a reserve where we could disappear for an entire afternoon, come back a bit bloodied and a little bit muddy. And I totally get it, because we did stuff that I'm just amazed that, we're all still alive as well. So it's... and there were no knee pads for me, or gloves or anything, or helmets. No, we didn't do that. So totally get that. So you grew up with in an adventure playground that you created with your brothers, and obviously sister stood most probably at a distance, aghast at what her brothers were doing.
That's right.
And she's going, "Oh my God, look what they're doing, Mum." Anyway, so it's but that was very typical of the time. So now we wrap kids in cotton wool, and we walked them to school, and we picked them up in cars, and the nanny state's alive and well today with so many rules to make sure that kids don't get hurt. So but those adventures you got, obviously you learned a lot of lessons, and that's where the book came from, lessons my brothers taught me. So but you went and did a degree, and it was in communications, and Microant now is in the whole communications, satellite technology area, space, amongst other things, I'm sure. What was the inspiration for you to, like, when you were a teenager, was it something that interested you? Did you see man land on the moon and went, where was the inspiration to get into and do a PhD in Advanced Electromagnetics? What was the inspiration?
I was a real late bloomer. I wanted to be a rock star. I played in my drums forever, and I played in a lot of bands. We played a variety of nightclubs. I thought I was going to make a living at it, and always going to be good. How can you go wrong? You can sleep as late as you want. You just go in there, you get paid in cash, and all this sort of thing. But at least, and we made it to the recording studio, but to make a long story short, the money wasn't adding up to any kind of a sustainable existence outside of the house. I was going to have to live with my mom and the family for the rest of my life at the income I was making. So I dove into a number of different occupations. Dishwasher, cook, a lumberjack, cutting down trees. I was a nurse at one point, and actually became a surgical nurse for a while. And then, I decided that I was going to go back and get. I wanted to go to medical school, so I had to go and get my bachelor's degree. and I took some courses in physics and biology, and I said, "Whoa, this is way better than anything to do with the medical industry." And then I started taking some engineering courses. Now, I was probably in my DNA already. I have of the five boys in a family, four of them are engineers, and my dad was an engineer, so engineering was in our blood, so to speak. And it seemed to make sense to me. It's almost as if I had no choice. So I decided to go to engineering school. First, I got a degree in physics, and then I took that and went to UMass, what is now UMass Dartmouth, to get a bachelor's in electrical engineering. But I had no particular objective in terms of a specialty until I was in one of the laboratories over there, and I saw an antenna. I said, "What is this?" And I was just so intrigued and mesmerized by what was taking place there. And even to this day, I get so excited when I see this, this artistic shape of conductors and insulators, formed in such a way that I can see the physics, the electromagnetics that are taking place. It is such a wondrous and beautiful thing, and to me. And I just fell in love with the antenna design. And the beauty of it is nobody wanted to design the antennas. To this day, it is almost impossible to find the antenna designer. I looked at some statistics the other day, and in the state of Florida, for every 100,000 lawyers, attorneys practicing, there is one antenna person who puts antenna designer as their occupation. So it is pretty rare, but it's something I absolutely love, and was the best decision I ever made, next to starting my own business, because communications, let's face it, it's ubiquitous, right? It's everywhere, and you need an antenna on each end of a communications link. So you're going to need me for one end or the other, or maybe both. And so antenna designers will always be in demand. So therefore, antenna production and solutions will always be in demand. So I was fairly certain that it was the right. I enjoyed it with a passion. I knew that I would always have, unless the antennas in physics somehow changed over the years, that I would always have employment, and that eventually I could start my own business, which was always in the back of my mind, even at a very young age growing up.
Right. So what era was this? You went and did nursing, wanted to do medicine, then went and fell in love with antenna design, which actually I find fascinating. In other words, sounds like you almost fell in love with the art of the antenna rather than the technology of the antenna. Is that correct?
That is exactly right. And to this day, I am really familiar with Maxwell's equations, which are the equations that govern, along with a couple of other equations, govern the physics behind electromagnetics. And I can look at those equations, going back to first principles, and instantly I can start envisioning the three-dimensional solution to a problem, based on those equations. And I can see it really quickly, almost instantaneously. And then if I have to explain to somebody, what that design is, that takes a lot more time. Then I have to use the jargon that is common to antenna designers or engineers in general, the documentation, all that goes through it. But yes, I guess you could tell I get a little excited about it. And it's rare that anybody wants to have a conversation with me about antennas. No, rare. No, this might be the only one. And because of that, that's why you find me a little bit incensed and enthusiastic here. Yeah, I just love everything to do with antennas. I just plain have a knack for it. If I have one expertise in this world, it's the ability to design antennas.
That's amazing. It's almost like you were born to be the antenna guy.
I'm with you.
Well, that's amazing. So in other words, you are already, when you look at it, you're visualizing 3D diagrams on how to build it and everything else almost instantaneously. That is just, look, you cannot, it has to be innate for you to be able to do that.
That's right. It's simply, I certainly understand antenna science. but I would say I more practice it as an art because it is highly creative. You're talking about shapes and figures, and these structures have the ability to do some sort of electromagnetic response to them. Now you look at art, right, and it does something with light, so that you perceive the art in a particular way, whatever the artist is trying to convey to you. It's not a lot different with the antennas. Instead of light, though, we're using electromagnetic spectrum, and those that can see it will see the beauty in it. And you might look at it and say, "Oh, that's a wire." I mean, I remember telling my brother, "Oh, I'm gonna go into antenna design and start my own company." He said, "How many antennas does the world need?" You'd be surprised because every customer wants something different and unique. So we have as many products as we do customers. It just everybody wants something different, and the thing is, for most people, they see it really, really difficult, and I love that because for us in our company, the way we've set it up, it's really easy. It is lucrative. We would never say that to anybody, but
I won't tell anyone, Charlie.
It gives us the opportunity, I think, to provide value in something that we really, really are excited about.
Okay, so let's move on to the next part of the story. You've done your degree, your BA, and then you fell in love. I don't want to be a doctor. I want to be the antenna guy. You'd fallen in love with antennas. Do you love your wife as much as the antenna, or was it a battle?
Let's just say it's a different kind of love.
Well, that is the perfect answer, Charlie. That is the perfect answer. Well done. Yeah. So, all right. So, what happened next? Did you go and do a PhD after that, or did you go and start microant? What was the next part of the story?
Well, I started a job at another company that was designing antennas, and they were in Massachusetts, where I was living at the time, and I had my master's degree. So, and I was entry level. I had no experience, but certainly I had passion. And the owner of that company, John Seavey, founder, president, and an MIT graduate, and an antenna expert in his own right, he recognized my abilities and he hired me. So, in a span of about 2 or 3 years, he wanted me to become the chief scientist of the company.
Wow.
Be a scientist. In reality, you should have a PhD. You should have a PhD. And so he sponsored me to get my PhD, which I did. And then I was promoted to chief scientist, and all was going good. And I said, one day I'm going to be running this company. I'm going to, be wearing a top hat and a monocle, and I'll be wearing a cape, and I'm going to be running the show over here. And I'm going to be the number one guy. And when Mr. John Seavey retires, people will be saluting me. And that, I was all set. That was my career plan and what appeared to be my trajectory at that time.
Okay. So, all right. So you're seeing this career laying out in front of you into the future. You are going to be lord of the business manor. You are going to be calling the shots, smoking a cigar while dictating everyone what to do. All right. So
That's right.
cool.
That's right.
Yeah. I do love that picture. That sounds really good. Was sipping a gin or a cognac? What would you be sipping? I'm
not so sure if it's a cigar as it would be a pipe, because I want to be able to sip. I want to be able to sip the cognac and take puff on the pipe, so something like that.
I think that's a really worthwhile goal. I think that really is, and but it doesn't look like you're quite there yet. So, where was the inspiration for microant? It's like you're within the company. Was there a moment going, I want to do it for myself? Was that so? What was the call?
Well, you see, we have set this up nicely. Okay, well, we were assigned to this project. We did a lot of antenna design at CV Engineering, and we had a lot of product. We had a product catalog, but we also did some really heavy, I would say, contracting and consulting, where I was a specialist, would come into a project and either fix it, get it running, or what have you. And I was assigned to one of these projects, and it was worth a fortune. I mean, the money we charged these people at the time for my hourly rate was ridiculous. In fact, it constituted at least 1/3 of the total revenue for the company over that period of time.
Wow.
So I said, and that's it. What more could you expect of an employee? And I would come in and meet with John Seavey, because this was I was going to Middleton, Rhode Island for this particular project, and the Seavey Engineering, the company I was working for, was in Cohasset, Massachusetts. And I would come back to home base, Cohasset, and talk to John Seavey, and we would talk about different jobs and things that were going on in the company, because he wanted to make sure that we were still connected. And he said, Charlie, he said, going forward, next time we meet, I want to start confiding with you in everything that's going on with the company and our next steps together. I said, oh boy, this is good. He's getting ready to retire. All right, I'm going to go shopping for for that cloak now, and all this other stuff. But and I left his office, and it was about a 90-minute ride to the Middleton, Rhode Island gig. And I get there, and a technician says to me, I hear that your company is for sale or possibly sold. I burst out laughing. I said, where the hell did you hear something ridiculous? This is a technician, right? How would he have I'm sitting there with the owner. I mean, how would this guy possibly? Well, you know what? The son of a bitch was right. I mean, the company was not only been up for sale, it was purchased. I just couldn't believe it. And I said, well, where did you hear this? From the program manager. I talked to this program manager. She said, yeah, it's true. Where did you hear it? I heard it from the CEO. What? So I called John, and he says, yes. So the company, I can't believe it. And my first reaction was just betrayal. I felt I had been betrayed. And now there was this new owner that I had to prove myself to. Is he gonna make me the super guru? Maybe he is. And I appreciated that John has every right to sell his company, but to not tell his employees, not tell his key employee, you can imagine what that would do to culture. In fact, did to culture. I mean, the number one person, earner for the company, disappeared in a hurry. Me. So, but ever the optimist, I said, okay, this new owner, certainly he will see what an incredible asset and resource I am to the company. Who knows what this guy will do? Maybe he'll give me a raise. Maybe he'll give me ownership of the company, a limousine. I don't know. So I said, well, I'm a little disappointed with John, but let me meet this new owner and see what he has to say. So the new owner comes in, and he did not ask me what my hopes were, what my dreams were, or anything about the company. Right. He simply said to me that the company was not making as much profit as it could. He needed to show his partners in the acquisition that he could turn things around and develop a profit. And so the first thing was doing, his first course of action was to reduce my salary by 20%.
What?
Just no questions asked, no rhyme, no reason, but just based on that.
Right.
And I said, can this get any worse? It's so. Yes. I said, I don't know. He said, well, go, let's talk again next week, and we can work out the details, and then we can start talking about where the company, is going from here. So I went straight to the HR person. I said, look, I'm going to be on vacation this next week. So, okay. And in that week, I called everybody I knew in the industry. I got the name Microant, and I went and got it, not trademark, but I went to have it registered as a business in Massachusetts. Started cold calling some of my customers. There was no employment contract with me. I was free to do everything I want. In other words, I started laying the foundation for a business.
Yep.
Yeah, and I had a shred of hope that they would do, these potential customers would give me some business. So I said, that's enough of me. I said, it did not matter if I it all failed. And I ended up shoveling shit for a living. It was better than having to work with somebody who at a whim could just completely change my the trajectory of of my professional development. And I said, no, I've got to take control for myself. This is ridiculous. And that's exactly what I did. So I went in that next week, and I had my hand stretched out, a smile. He had a smile on his face. Oh my gosh, I thought he was going to kiss me. And I think he thought that I came and said, Pradeep, you're right. 20,000, make it 25. But instead, I said, thank you very much. I hope that you have success with your company, but I'm done. And I saluted, and the shock on his face made it all worthwhile. I'll go back and do it again. I play it over to my mind again and again. It's some of the times as I replay it, he drops to a knee, and tries to kiss my hand. Another times I slap him across the face. But in the reality of it was the look of shock on his face. I don't know. And I don't know if he was choking or saying wait, but I just turned and left, as if there was a camera on me and I needed to make a perfect exit, which is what I did. So then I'm off and running. And I'm driving home. I'm excited. I can't wait. And how much business that I have booked? Zero. Yeah. Right. But that didn't matter to me, because if somebody would say, "Oh, you left a position where you had all of these various benefits, and most important, you had stability and you had security," those don't exist. They're an illusion. Right?
Yes, they are.
The only thing that is secure is in how you perceive yourself and the faith that you have in yourself to succeed at anything. And when people say, I would start a business, this was most recently, if I had a year's worth of work ahead of me, I say, forget it. Why? I said 2 weeks. If your threshold is more than 2 weeks, forget it. I said, you don't have to take a dive and a leap like I did. You could break it up into small steps. But for me, I said, I am done. I don't care, what the situation is. I'm not ever going to work for anybody ever again. And somehow, some way, I was right all the time. I may not have believed it, but all I know is I was not turning back. I was never going to go back to that. So that launched the company, and I started out consulting initially, and then eventually started making product and started generating revenue, which allowed me to bring on additional team members, and then the company grew from there.
Wow, that's a great story. And I cannot believe that someone had lack of awareness to think that they're going to motivate staff by reducing their wage by 20% off the bat. Like you removed your hopes and dreams almost in one stroke of a pen.
Holy cow. Yes, that's right. Amen to that. And others say, he really did you a favor. He did you an enormous favor, because if he otherwise, and that's probably a ring of truth to that, because had he said instead to me, we're going to keep your pay the same, and maybe as the company makes more money, or maybe said things are tight right now, we need to reduce your pay, but we want. And Charlie, what is your, what are your hopes and dreams? What are your aspirations? Where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? I would have probably been satisfied to have stayed there forever. But you're right. The stupidity of the proposition that he had made was something that was not going to be missed on me, and certainly not something that I don't want to experience twice. So I was out of there.
How's that company doing today?
They went straight to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah, I can see you smoking a pipe right there. And wearing the cape by this time. All right.
And composing songs, but yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, I saw that you wanted to be a rock star, and I think you got the looks and the hair to do it, Charlie. So maybe there's a future.
Something stuck with me,
yeah. Yeah, maybe you could just masquerade as a famous rock star, because that's what you look like to me in the photos, and do a legacy tour. No one would know that.
That's right. Yeah. I know. Yeah. I still haven't given up that dream, but yeah.
Don't ever give up that dream. You don't know what lies beyond, do we? Okay, so
No.
okay, so Microant. Tell us a bit about Microant today. How many employees and what's the revenue? Whatever you can share. I'd just been interested to say you've walked away, become a consultant, and then started building your own product. So let's go straight to where you are now. So I've got some other questions as well, including duffel bags, and people will know what that is in a minute. So where are you today? You sound like you're selling some fantastic technology and communications tech. And so how big is the company today?
We always hold ourselves somewhere between 50 and 100 employees. 70 is the sweet spot. There's really no need for us to grow much larger than that. We supply antennas to the who's who in the industry. I'm not going to give you exact revenue figures, but there were no complaints. But the company, the name Microant stands for microwave antennas. Microwaves are is the frequency spectrum within the radio frequency band between 1 gigahertz and 40 gigahertz. So we design antennas primarily in those bands. And you had mentioned earlier about some of the ultra wideband SatCom products that we sell. So we do things for terrestrial as well as satellite. You certainly heard of XM and Sirius Radio. We did their antennas. So that was a commercial opportunity for us. But we do a lot of things as well for the Department of Defense, all the major, not only defense contractors, but those that are making like Airbus or Lockheed Martin, or the list goes on and on. Boeing, Northrop Grumman, some of our customers. So we design antennas. Anybody who needs a high-end custom antenna that they're not able to get anywhere else. That part of the reason the company was so successful, I was always more interested in providing value as opposed to competing on price. In other words, if somebody else could do what we could do, or do it cheaper or better, I'll tell them about go to the other guy, go get it from them. But if we had something that nobody else could compete with, then we could pretty much set our price. And those are the kind of customers that we wanted, the one that would appreciate the value and the as well as the competitive edge that using our technology would provide them. And the thing is, in the beginning, I had a sense that it was going to be difficult for me to compete against the company that I had just left and others that were like them. And for me to make a name for myself, I had to take on the jobs that nobody else wanted to take because they were too damn hard. The specifications were too onerous, and there was going to be a lot of effort into executing it, the development. So we took those on, and I thought that I would do that in the beginning to make a name for ourselves, but that kept coming back and coming back and coming back until I realized we will never get an easy job. Somebody said, this job is so hard. They're all hard. If it wasn't hard, we wouldn't have the opportunity. People don't come to us from the easy stuff. They've gone to the other guy or they've developed it themselves. So that's what we do. We provide the most difficult solutions in the antenna industry and for some of the customers that I mentioned to you. And for GPS antennas, for instance, you'd think, well, that's a cheap little thing. What are those? $5, $3, 50 cents. Well, the antennas that we make for GPS, they sell on the market for anywhere from $1,200 to $1,500 a piece, and they provide like centimeter accuracy, and they're used for geodetic surveying, or they're used on tractors that are using to plant seeds and sow fields. So, and many of our customers, by the way, are in Australia. So, both satellite and terrestrial use. So, we're kind of the brand behind the brand. You never see the name Microant anywhere, but we are everywhere. I would be surprised if you if you've used a communication device, anyone on the planet, you have used our technology.
Wow. In other words, you're in a very custom niche really within the industry that solve big problems for companies.
A custom niche, but with a very high demand.
Yeah. So what are some of the interesting ways antenna is used? You talked about basically you're so accurate, your antennas, that they actually can guide a tractor to within what?
Centimeter accuracy on these GPS antennas.
7 meter?
Sub-centimeter.
Sub-centimeter
Less than a centimeter.
accuracy.
Yes.
Wow.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow, that is amazing. And agriculture tech has certainly come a long way in the last decade or so, hasn't it? So
agriculture really has. I remember sitting in looking at one of these farmers' journals that had a tractor on it. It was every bit as complex, the technology of this tractor, is in a fighter jet. I couldn't get over the things that was on this jet. The farmer is only there as a matter of convenience. It can gladly go 24/7 without any operator on board. The sophistication of the technology that are in these tractors. Yeah. So agriculture and autonomous vehicles, both land and in the air. Things like UAVs. We're seeing a lot of emerging technologies. The really hot thing now is the so-called self-acquiring antennas, meaning that you just set them down and they have a beam forming, an adaptive beam, meaning the coverage that links to them to whatever the target is. You set it down on a table, a roof your car, and then it tracks the various satellites up there, of which there are a lot of satellites up there, the so-called GEOs, LEOs, HEOs, and MEOs. Earth, GEO, right? The geostationary Earth orbiting, and LEO, low Earth orbiting, et cetera, et cetera. You've heard of a SpaceX, and so that's one of the LEO systems that are out there now. And
right.
We supplied them with a lot of the ground terminals.
Right. Okay. Awesome. So during the Ukraine war, internet access, because the Russians tried to block signals, but then Elon Musk came in and said he's got these low orbit antennas, whatever, or satellites.
LEOs, yep, they're the LEOs.
Yeah. So basically, and I've heard people in Australia using them a lot too, instead of satellite, well, as an alternate to the other systems, but like the speed is great. So isn't he how many has he launched? 2,000 or something of these?
Some crazy number of them. He's launching them faster than they can put regular. He's smart because he knows it takes the government so long to affect regulations. Get them up there, right? And when the regulations are, well, yeah, they're already up there. You're gonna have to grandfather me in, So, oh my gosh, though, it's a little alarming. But eventually, his plan is to get to Mars, and maybe he'll take the constellation with him.
Yeah. It's amazing. So let's move on to some business lessons, which are, I think, contained not only from your watching your brothers, but within what you call the 4S framework. Here we go. We've got a framework, 4S. And 4S is Salability, Sensibility, Sustainability, and Scalability. So can you tell us a little bit about the importance of this structure for business and entrepreneurs? So tell us about the 4S, I suppose, principles of business that you use. So let's start with Salability.
Okay. Well, just a little bit background on it. When I was reading through the original manuscript, that the 4S structure, concept, framework didn't exist yet. But at least I hadn't identified it. But as I looked through the different things that the elements that had brought the company from me as a person into this organization with all these processes and other things going on, I realized that there was a transformation that took place. The transformation had to be some characters characteristics, attributes, things that were inherent to me that somehow flowed and transformed into a company. And as I read through it again and again, I realized there were 4 categories of these characters, which you just named. The first two, salability and sensibility, those are the character traits that we all have in some degree. Those are personal character traits, meaning salability is your ability to sell yourself, meaning that you're not necessarily a salesperson, but in everyday life, you want to be a person that others want to interact with, and you want to be able to interact with other people. And they interact with you because you have some value to add, either in a conversation or maybe you have integrity or something else that makes them want to engage with you. These are the things that you emote. You are the source that they come out. Sensibility is those things that are taking place in the world and that you are absorbing and taking in. Like, it's an awareness, a situational awareness of the environment you're in, whether it's the industrial environment that you're in, competitive environment, or maybe, it's out in the middle of the desert. And it's, in other words, it's taking in the various elements that you're able to see and learn about, and taking that data internally so that you have the ability to make good decisions so that you can survive as a person and then as a business. Now, the next 2 traits or characters, these are more pertinent to the business, but a business is not a business until there's people in it. Some people can argue, well, no, what about a parking lot? There's no people. I'm not talking about that kind of business. I'm talking a business about the type of business that is in the business of creating jobs, as well as providing a valued product with services and building equity. And something that is going to have a reputation that involves a framework and contributes to the community. So the first, or the third S, but the first one that applies to a business is what I call sustainability. And a business becomes a company when you have people involved, right? And that's how I try to distinguish them. A business is essentially this thing that is doing transaction, it's operations, but there's not that lifeblood, there's a culture, right, that brings life to it, that creates this so-called company. Yeah. And one of those things is sustainability. And sustainability is brought about when you have a team or a culture and you have the people that are bringing this enterprise to life.
Yes.
Like I bring out, if you have a one-person operation, that can't possibly be sustainable, because if that person goes home, the company shuts down. Like if it's just me and I'm mowing grass for a living and the lawnmower breaks, that's not a very sustainable job. I better have 2 mowers.
That's right.
The people pushing it and the mower itself, right? And so to have sustainability, you don't have any reliance upon any one capital asset or any human resource. Sustainability means you're able to maintain an existence, independent of one, but essential item. The fourth S, which is scalability, again, is growth. Now we can grow it as individuals, but I mean it in the terms of a business or a company growing. It means that they are producing more of the same quality. That's what I mean by that. Growth, you think, oh, we're earning more money. That's growth. Oh, we're in a bigger building. We hired more employees. We have greater revenue. Those are certainly interesting growth metrics, but I see them as a byproduct of true scalability. In true scalability, you're able to grow and you do not compromise quality. If anything, you increase quality. I always use, without naming any names, is a coffee chain that you might be familiar with, that you have always gone to. When the original coffee chain started, the original coffee house started, they roasted the coffee right in that cafe. You smell the aroma of the roasting beans, and you had a barista in there who knew exactly where the beans were sourced and how to roast them and made the coffee, and you talked to them as they made your coffee. Yes, you got a great coffee, but you got an experience, right? That brought you in there and kept coming you back. Then they grow the operation. Now they have several cafes, and they find out, well, we really can't get that quality barista in every one of them. Well, we can't roast beans in every one of these shops. We have to do it at a central location. And then what you have is a diluted product. And I'm not talking necessarily just about the product that you drink, the coffee, but the whole experience is diluted. I would say, has it grown? Are the revenues off the chart? Do they have more? Yes. But is that scalable? Did they maintain the quality? And I'd say absolutely not. So what I mean by scalability is that the product that you are making more of has exactly the same performance criteria and compliance and expectations that the customer has, that you've agreed to with the customer. You're not using cheaper materials. You might find by economies of scales ways to reduce the cost, but the quality must be absolutely the same. Quantity changes, but not quality. I try as hard as I can to articulate to that to people, and many of them just don't get it. Well, we're making more money. We've scaled. We have twice as much. If that is your goal, great. But that's the different, I think, how an entrepreneur thinks and how a business accountant might think.
Yeah. In other words, you want to make sure you maintain the full experience and also the culture that you created as well.
Well, that's right, because it's the company really gets big. If I get to the point where I don't know the name of every employee or something about them, or I haven't sold them one of my sorting moon bags, then things have gone awry. It's time for me to get the hell out, because now it's grown well beyond my ability to be able to participate in it in a meaningful way that's fulfilling to me. So, and you want quality-minded people. It's like you don't want a doctor to follow people around and forcing them to make sure that they practice good healthcare. You want people to be trained in healthcare so that they take care of themselves and they have healthy habits. It's the same thing with quality. Quality is essentially healthy habits that you practice within the company to make sure that the product is meeting the standards that the quality team has set, and you're just practicing quality-minded, practices. Yeah. It's as simple as that. When you have a culture that is practicing in that way, you've got not only a sustainable company, but one that is primed for scalability.
Right. I really love it. I think it's really great. And I think it sounds like you want to get to the soul of being the entrepreneur as well, not just being an accountant entrepreneur, and you need to have good systems and processes which enable quality and also enable scalability. So now I have a little question about the second point, sensibility. You don't mean being sensible, you mean like being aware and listen to your senses? Is that what that means?
Well, if I'm going to offer a product to an industry, it better be one that's going to be it's something that's going to have value that I'm going to be able to sell. It's going to have something that distinguishes it so that others would want to purchase it. So that's given. But now what about partnerships, both with your suppliers and with your customers? Oh my gosh, we have been screwed by more of our customers, and it happens less and less these days. And if they do it, it's because they are absolute bullies with with lawyers and expenses account that we can't possibly muster a fight up against. However, in the end, it's between people, right? It's yes. Somebody making a decision. If you can be sensible, to the type of person, the character of the people or the person that you are transacting with, to forget contracts, right? You can compose a contract that is it has that is mutually beneficial. In the end, it comes down to the character of that other person. And I've seen some shocking things happen. And of course, it doesn't happen just business. People could be taken advantage of everywhere. But this notion of the zero-sum game, I don't know that how that ever came about, and I don't know how you do business with that person twice. So we didn't know that particular customers were going to steal misappropriate our intellectual property and produce the products on their own. But once we learned that how that happened and what the mechanisms were in place, one was stay away from that customer, but to look for that and look for other mechanisms that would prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
And as we stood back and said, of course that customer is going to do that. Of course that was within the agenda the whole time. But at least now we have we're sensible enough to know what to look for going in the future. So it essentially means looking for warning signs, right? Being aware of all the obstacles that could be in your path and converting them into opportunities.
Right. Okay. All right. Makes more sense now.
Oh, good for you. Cue that up nicely.
Okay. So let's move on to a very interesting passion project business that you're doing called Sortie Moon. Tell us how that started and what does Sortie Moon do? So this is going to be, I read a little bit about it. So maybe you could show us what Sortie Moon produces.
Okay. Well, this is one. I have literally hundreds of these bags, and can you see that swordfish on there?
Yeah, swordfish. Great. Yep.
There's a swordfish and there's a moon embroidered around. That's one of the earlier versions, and that's the so-called Sortie Moon. Sortie is short for swordfish. I would spend a lot of time on Martha's Vineyard going fishing with a lot of the locals there, and they were really into fishing out in the canyons off the edge. And one of the things they liked to fish for was swordfish, but swordfish most generally hit at night. So they would want to go fishing for them at night. And I would take them out of my boat and we'd go fishing. And I said, okay, we'll fish all night, but nobody could. One person always has to be awake. I don't want us to drift into the shipping lanes and get run down by one of these huge cargo ships. Oh, no. So I'm sleeping there and I have an uneasy feeling. I get up, everybody is sound asleep. So
No.
I said, what the hell? And so they would always ask me, come on, can we go sword fishing? Can we go sword fishing? And I said, no, last time we went sword fishing, you all fell asleep. And it was a fool, but they said, but it's a Sortie Moon, right? And that had, as if that was going to convince me, oh, now it's worth dying. But I just thought that was hilarious, this Sortie Moon. And then it so happened during COVID, one of the other things, besides writing a book, I was doing a lot of sewing. And I said after 100 bags, I was going to stop because I had no idea who I was going to give it to. So at 100 bags, that's when I started writing the book. And I said, what am I going to do with these bags? And that's kind of how Sortie Moon was born. And we put a website together and there was an enormous amount of interest in it, but I haven't launched it yet because I need a CEO to run it. So I'm working on that. But I just don't have the time to put in it right yet. I'm really close to that. But here's the idea behind Sortie Moon. It's a duffel bag. You saw it. It's a duffel bag, but it's made completely out of marine grade materials, like it's YZZ zippers that will seal and be water resistant, never rust. If there is any metal on there, it's stainless steel, marine grade. As I was explaining earlier to you offline, all the materials are made from marine canvases that have a polycarbonate coating so as to be UV resistant. As well as they never get moldy. They scratch them, forget it. They never fade in the sun. It's all you can do to penetrate them with the knife. They're really tough bags. I liken them to the so-called Yeti coolers, which are a really high-end cooler, and you see a lot of boaters with them. It's the same thing with these. This is the I call it the Yeti of duffel bags. And if you were to go to the website, which I think is called sortiemoon.com, you'll see some of the bags we have on there and the prices, and you can do anything you want on there except order a bag because I haven't but I have the machines, I have and we did build up a lot of bags, and I will probably my goal is to launch it this year, and it's something I'm kind of excited about.
I look forward to it. That'll be
that's good. Well, I'll send you a bag.
Okay, that'd be fantastic because
oh hell yeah.
Yeah, I'd love one. I'm about to looking at buying a boat or sharing a boat, so I might need one, I think.
Oh, you're going to need one. And they come in 3 sizes, and I put one inside the other, so you get it all as one kit, and here you go.
I'd love one. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm on my boat now. Did I mention that?
No. What sort of boat is it?
It's a Viking, which is made here in the States. It's as a sport fisherman, it's 52 feet, and I take it out for fishing and fun. And when I'm not in the office, actually, I wrote a lot of the book here. This was one of the safe places I could come during COVID, and I do a lot of work and thinking here because I could be completely alone and isolated when I need to be, or walk over to the local bar when I don't want to be isolated. So yeah, I'm here floating aboard the boat.
That's very interesting. So really, it's a man cave for inspiration for you.
Yes, a floating man cave.
A floating man cave. I like that. And that's part of one of the goals I'd like is one looking at it, because it's very hard to justify a boat from how much it costs you for everything.
It is a liability. You see, I'm sitting here in the boat, not cruising on the boat, but Lord, the price of diesel fuel right now, it's I can't run the boat like I used to. Run off and go fishing. Hey, let's go because let's go to the Bahamas. That's not happening. It's fuel is just prohibitively expensive, so I can only take short runs, and and fish a fraction of I would otherwise want to.
Yeah. Is it a flybridge cruiser? Is that what it sounds like? Has it got a flybridge on it?
Yeah, it has a helm and it has a flybridge. Yes.
Okay. Cool. I can imagine it. So in Australia, they produce a Riviera. I think I've heard of the Viking. So that was my original big boat dream, was to have a flybridge cruiser. But not sure yet. I'm sort of looking at different types of boats at the moment. But anyway, it's fun. So, but I don't love the fact is a mobile man cave. That's really, really, really good. A floating man cave, however you want to call it. So that's great. So I've used up enough of your time, and great to interview you on a boat. That's awesome. So that's fantastic. So any last tips for entrepreneurs that are on the journey, or entrepreneurs that are about to start the journey, that you think are really important? I know we've already mentioned quite a lot, your 4S: salability, sensibility, sustainability, and scalability. Is there any lessons that, tips that you'd like to leave for our listeners and viewers?
Well, if you're considering starting your own business, and I'm talking more to the person who has considered it and says, yes, this is what I want to do, is then they want to know how, what, where, why, how. This is the first thing you should do and ask yourself is, what is motivating you?
Yep.
Why are you doing this?
Yep.
And knowing that is important. I'll tell you why. It's not money that's going to launch you and sustain you. It's not smart business decisions, accounting, a good customer. It is that illogical, crazy determination, that perseverance, that will from within, that is going to sustain you.
Exactly.
When logic, money, and everything else is absent. And you say, what is motivating me to do this? In my case, I did not want to go back to corporate America. I did not want to work for the likes of somebody who, did not care anything about me except how I affected the bottom line. I didn't ever want to be in that situation again. I wanted to be in control of my destiny. Not because I want to be in control so much. I did not want to be in control. So if anybody was going to take charge of it, it was going to be me. So you have to understand what that motivation is. If it's to make more money, then think twice. If it's to have more free creative license, okay, you're on the right track. But if it's because you have this indescribable need, this itch, you are a free thinker, risk does not scare you because you see it, you identify it, and then you find strategies to overcome it. Those are the things, right? Those are the building blocks of a good entrepreneur, because once you have made that decision and you have identified that thing that is going to motivate you and sustain you, the thing that I call the kinetic energy of what is going to push you forward, then you are really ready to start your business venture.
Yeah, I totally get that. When I started jeffbullis.com blog, it was an incredible curiosity about social media. And I believed it was going to change the world. And I wanted to be part of that journey. And I was curious as shit. And
curiosity, you just hit the nail on that. That is a really good motivation. And you were able to put that in a single word. See, that's why you are successful, because you were to boil it down to that one single word. Yeah. So good for you.
Yeah, it's and then the other thing I think I would share with my viewers as well as yourself, and I'm not talking to anyone who doesn't know, is you got to play the long game. And that means that you are going to ride the ups and downs. And you're exactly right in that if it's an innate curiosity and passion that drives you, and you happen to have the skills that support that, you obviously do. You are built to be who you are today. In other words, you are living your authentic self. And you just happen to make money along the way.
That's right. Just a positive byproduct of all this craziness. Yes.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't live considered lives. They don't sit down, allow themselves time to think. They're afraid of silence because they're afraid what might show up themselves.
Yes, afraid. That's right. And fear, how that paralyzes. Can paralyze us in so many different ways. And the fear for me is looking back, I should have done, or I wish I had done. Instead, I jump in and I said, well, it didn't go as I planned, but so what? I still did it, and I'm not regretting that I didn't give it a shot, and was wondering for my entire life whether or not I had taken the right path.
Well, it's fantastic, and I love your passion. I love what you've done in your life, the lessons you've learned, and one thing that sums you up is you're never going to die wondering.
That's right. Okay. Thank you, Jeff. This has been such a pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Charlie. It really has been, and I will promise you that I will visit you in Massachusetts and in real life, because I'd love to. It would be an absolute joy to actually share a cognac or a beer at the local bar near your boat and just talk shit for hours. That would be fantastic.
Absolutely. And when you come, you will be sporting a Sorty Moon bag. And as we say, pack the bag, not the baggage, right? And so
I love it. It's awesome.
You'll be in style, and you'll be able to come right aboard the boat. And you'll feel, right along with the rest of us that you're geared out properly.
Fantastic. Thank you, Charlie. It's been an absolute joy. Thank you for coming on the Jeff Bullis Show.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I loved every minute of it.